Hi everyone, today I'm going to be doing a discussion on Patrick DeWitt's The Sisters Brothers, published in 2011 by Anansi House. The Sisters Brothers has been up for several awards, it's been shortlisted for several awards, and it's actually won several as well. Born in Canada, Patrick DeWitt is considered a Canadian writer because he's up for Canadian Literary Awards, and you can't do that unless you're Canadian. However, he lives in the States. He lives in Portland, Oregon. And he's also stated that he has lived in California as well as Washington. I find it really interesting that he is a Canadian author and he's up for these awards, and yet he spends his time and is a resident of the US. When I was young, I used to write stories and they would always be set in the US, and I think that's because that's all I really knew. The books that I read were clearly not by Canadian authors, and they were never set in Canada, and I just kind of mimicked what I had seen in published works, and I never bothered to use the exercise of writing as a way to explore my own hometown or explore my city or anything like that. I was just dead set on kind of copying the books that I had read myself. So I wonder if there was an element of that in DeWitt's childhood, if he always kind of fantasized as well about our southern neighbor as opposed to wanting to explore Vancouver Island, which is where he was born. I can shamelessly say that The Sisters Brothers has easily become one of my favorite books of all time. Eli Sisters narrates his life of assassination and vigilantism with his brother Charlie. The two are a very inseparable pair, and they are in a very codependent kind of relationship. Charlie is the eldest, and to be honest, he's kind of an asshole, but I think he's the funniest character. He definitely gets all the zingers, and I think because he lives this life of gruesome assassination, he kind of feels the need to create a light atmosphere, and the only way that he can think to do that is to point at people and kind of make fun of them. We learn that as a child, Charlie killed his first man, and I kind of suspect that it was only a matter of time before he led into this kind of life of death and destruction. He is definitely very bloodthirsty, and he's also very obsessed with greed and materialism and wealth. Where Charlie is action, Eli is restraint. Eli definitely has a killer instinct, but it's never at the forefront of his mind in the same way it is with Charlie. We're so lucky that it's Eli who is narrating, because we get this really intimate look at every kind of nook and cranny in his mind. He is desperate to find meaning in his life, and I think part of that meaning stems from his realization that he has a very automatic dependence on Charlie's leadership. I saw my bulky person in the windows of the passing storefronts and wondered, when will that man there find himself to be loved? Returning his pen to its holder, he told us, I will have him gutted with that scythe. I will hang him by his own intestines. At this piece of dramatic exposition, I could not help but roll my eyes. A length of intestines would not carry the weight of a child, much less a full-grown man. Eli and Charlie have been hired by the Commodore, who is a very wealthy and very mysterious figure, to kill and bring to justice Herman Kermit Worm. This, perhaps, was what lay at the root of the hysteria surrounding what came to be known as the Gold Rush. Men desiring a feeling of fortune, the unlucky masses hoping to skin or borrow the luck of others, or the luck of a destination. A seductive notion, and one I thought to be wary of. To me, luck was something you either earned or invented through strength of character. You had to come by it honestly. You could not trick or bluff your way into it. Worm's character is pretty baffling. I think if I met him in person, I would be totally creeped out based on the descriptions that were given. And yet, every character, seemingly, that comes in contact with him is in this kind of adoration and this trance. People seem to have this real tenderness for him, and it's as if he's this kind of soft blip on the rough and rustic horizon that the Sisters Brothers have to live in. There are a few women in this book, and each one we meet, Eli tries to court them, but other than that, there isn't really a kind of romantic tension until we meet Herman. He really feels like, to me, there's this like romantic relationship almost between himself and some of the men that he meets. It's almost as if friendship is totally impossible in the world that these characters live in. If you don't have your kin, you don't have anybody. I will never be a leader of men, and neither do I want to be one, and neither do I want to be led. I thought, I want to lead only myself. Eli has never been alone, and he's always had Charlie with him, so I don't think he really gets how lonesome most of these people's lives are. They're very much shackled by their solitude, which might explain why they go totally crazy when Herman wants to befriend them. The last character of importance is Tub, Eli's horse. Yes, he is a character, and yes, he is important. deWitt also stated that he was really worried when he first wrote the book because he knew that it was a Western-themed book, but he knew that it wasn't following the formula of a Western, and he was worried that Western genre fans would not accept it, but it's definitely Western-inspired, if nothing else. I think we can all agree on that. And in a Western story, and in that era of our lives, horses were definitely more than just means of transport. In many cases they were means of transport, but there was also a relationship and a bond between horse and rider, especially if you're a cowboy, especially if you're on horseback all day. It's really interesting that Eli goes out of his way to tell us as readers that he has never named a horse before. He and Charlie have always just had horses, and they've never given them any names. I mean, there's a lot of people nowadays that give their cars names, so it's interesting that they didn't give any horses names. These ones, Nimble and Tub, came with their names. Another thing that validates the fact that Tub and Eli have a relationship is the fact that it's constantly evolving throughout the story, and Charlie is constantly scrutinizing it. The fact that Charlie is interested in it and sees it as a real relationship and something that he needs to kind of shame Eli about, I think that really validates its existence. I was often forced to whip him, which some men did not mind doing, and which in fact some enjoy doing, but which I did not like to do. And afterward he, Tub, believes me to be cruel, and thought to himself, sad life. Sad life. Tub is a pretty lackluster horse. He is not as athletic as any of the horses that Charlie and Eli have had before, and I think it's because of that lack of pizzazz and lack of chrome that Eli kind of bothers to look at him as anything but means of transport. Eventually Eli basically treats Tub as a comrade, and he's constantly caring for him, and I think it's because he wants to look past his own kind of physique and wants to stop worrying about his dieting and, you know, courting women and so on. Because of that, he is able to look past Tub and look past his appearance as this really lackluster animal and see the animal that's inside. What I admire most about deWitt is not just his characterization, but his writing and his craft. You know, when you read a book and there'll be somewhere in the middle, there'll be this line, this phrase that jumps out at you and you're like, wow, like somebody somewhere in the world, whether it was written last year or 200 years ago, someone out there feels the way that I feel, has the same fear I have, has the same thoughts that I do. And that's an amazing connecting thing. That is like the function of connectivity that books have in our lives. I found that every other page you were finding some gem, some beautiful piece of writing, and it was all within the same story. It was all written by the same guy, and I was totally blown away that somebody out there is capable of writing in such an exquisite and eloquent way. But I could not sleep without proper covering, and spent the rest of the night rewriting lost arguments from my past, altering history so that I emerged victorious. We can all of us be hurt, and no one is exclusively safe from worry and sadness. You are afraid of hell, but that's all religion is, really. Fear of a place you'd rather not be, and where there's no such thing as suicide to steal us away. Just your everyday group of civilized gentlemen, sitting in a round robin to discuss the events of the day with quivering erections. Okay, so as for questions, the only real questions that I have are the kind of magical elements. What did you guys think about those? Like, they kind of seemed to just disappear and didn't really come up with much at the end. But there was that gypsy witch's door frame, and you know, that whole curse that Eli wasn't sure if he had or not. Like, do you think he had a curse? Do you think it was just a red herring? Same with the girl who tried to poison the dog. Like, oh, Eli's not into that at all, but she tries to poison this dog on a dream. Later, she almost tries to poison a person, and none of these really ever come to fruition, seemingly. So, do you think that they existed for some purpose, or what? That was the biggest question mark for me in this whole book. Okay, so have you read this book? What did you think? What do you think about all the characters that I've talked about? Who was your favorite? Was it Tub? So I can't wait to see what Jason and Karate thought of it. It's going to be so exciting, and I hope that they're able to answer my questions, and I hope that you're also able to answer my questions, because I'd love to know what people think about the girl and the witch. Anyway, I hope you're having an awesome day, and I hope you end up reading this book if you haven't already. Talk to you later. Bye.